Time's Malevolent Gift. This story is by Inspection Familiar 74. The sun was just beginning to rise as I clipped the leashes onto the eager dogs, preparing for another early morning walk. I was leading a group of dogs on their walk, a job I had picked up on weekends to make ends meet. Being a student was tough enough, but working as a cashier at a small supermarket wasn't paying the bills. Rent, utilities, and groceries were stretching my finances thin, and walking dogs was my way to bridge the gap. It wasn't how I wanted to spend my weekends. I'd rather be resting or studying, but the money was necessary for my survival. My dreams just felt out of reach. Today, I wasn't paying much attention to where we were going. I let the dogs lead the way, figuring they'd enjoy the freedom to explore. They pulled me into a street I had never been down before. The place had an eerie vibe, with old buildings and an unsettling emptiness. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. Balancing school, work and bills was a constant struggle. Walking dogs was supposed to be a simple task, but today it felt heavier than usual, as if the strange street we had wandered into mirrored my own sense of being lost. The dogs seemed unaffected by the atmosphere, their tails wagging as they sniffed around. As we walked further, my eyes landed on a shop whose windows showcased antique items. My curiosity got the best of me, and I walked closer to examine the collection of trinkets and curiosities. It contained a variety of vintage clocks, ornate jewellery boxes, and dusty old books with faded covers. A beautiful brass telescope and a collection of porcelain dolls seemed to be staring at me with their cold, dead eyes. Each item seemed to tell a story. I decided it was a good time for a break. I tied the dogs' leashes to a nearby post and pulled out some bowls and a bottle of water from my backpack, pouring out fresh water for them. The dogs lapped it up eagerly, their tongues flicking out to catch every drop. They needed a rest, and honestly, so did I. With the dogs settled, I turned back to the antique store, feeling a pull of curiosity. When I was younger, I spent a few years living with my grandparents, surrounded by old furniture and keepsakes. Perhaps that's why I was always drawn to such places. Stepping inside, a tiny bell jingled above the door, announcing my arrival. The interior of the store was dimly lit, with shelves lined with all manner of antiquities. The air was thick, with a scent of aged wood and musty paper. Dust motes floated lazily in the sunlight streaming through the grimy windows, casting a hazy glow over everything. I wandered through the narrow aisles, my fingers brushing against items that spoke of bygone eras. There were intricate pocket watches, their faces frozen in time, and tarnished silverware laid out on a velvet cushion. A gramophone with a large brass horn sat in one corner, and I could almost hear the faint echo of old records it once played. On one shelf, I found an assortment of glass bottles, each filled with mysterious, colourful liquids. Beside them were stacks of leather-bound journals, their spines cracked with age, hinting at stories long forgotten. The walls were adorned with framed sepia photographs, their subjects staring back with expressions lost to history. Despite the dust, the shop wasn't dirty. It had an odd charm, like stepping into a time capsule. One shelf in particular held my attention. It was adorned with items that seemed connected to Native American culture. There were beautiful framed paintings, though they had clearly seen better days, depicting scenes of nature and wildlife. Each brushstroke captured the spirit and essence of the land, despite the wear and tear. Hanging beside the paintings were ornate crafts made of feathers, beads, and objects found in nature, dream catchers, their webs woven with meticulous care, dangled softly in the wind. Among these items were pieces of jewellery, delicate and beautiful, bracelets and necklaces adorned with turquoise stones, and silver charms gleamed softly in the dim light. One particular necklace caught my attention, a cord with a pendant that featured a sun and moon intertwined, reminiscent of the yin and yang symbol. I picked up the pendant, leaving the cord on its stand, and held it in my hand, examining it closely. There was something captivating about it, something I couldn't quite explain. It felt like my brain was trying to register a memory or sensation connected to this small piece of jewellery. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, startling me out of my reverie. I turned quickly to see an old man standing behind me. You like that piece, young man?" he asked, his voice soft yet slightly raspy. The man was the shopkeeper, and his appearance was as peculiar as the items he sold. He was tall and thin, with a hunched posture that made him seem even older. His skin was deeply wrinkled, and his eyes were a piercing shade of blue, contrasting sharply with his silver hair that hung in wisps around his face. He wore an old, moth-eaten sweater that seemed to blend in with the shop's antique ambience. His manner of speaking was just as strange as his appearance, with a cadence that made each word sound deliberate and slightly eerie. "That pendant is quite special," he continued, his eyes not leaving mine. "It's been in this shop for as long as I can remember. It calls to certain people." I swallowed, still feeling the remnants of my initial shock. It's beautiful," I managed to say, my voice sounding weak in comparison to his. The old man gave me a cryptic smile, his eyes gleaming in the strange light. "Ah, the pendant," he began, his voice taking on a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality. "It's more than a piece of jewellery. The Native Americans who crafted it believed it held great power. There are stories of those who wore it gaining a strategic mind, almost as if it granted them supernatural abilities. Warriors and leaders sought it for its rumoured power." He paused, letting his words sink in. I wasn't sure what to think. It sounded like one of those stories street vendors tell, trying to sell a pen by claiming it once belonged to a famous historical figure, yet having a suitcase full of identical pens. "Many have tried to possess it," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "Some say the pendant bestows upon its wearer a gift, a keen sense of strategy, almost otherworldly in its precision. Perhaps it is just a myth, or perhaps it is something more." I chuckled nervously, unsure whether to believe his tale. That's quite a story," I said, trying to keep my skepticism from showing too much. Despite the odd story, I was still drawn to the pendant. There was something about it that I couldn't shake. "How much is it?" I asked, deciding to ignore the peculiar narrative and focus on the object itself. The old man pointed to a small sign behind the counter and asked, "Can't you read?"